Point-and-click games are my guilty pleasure. There's just something about the interface, the responsibility of the player to make consistent decisions, and in many cases, the tickling of the brain to solve problems in ways that might not be conventional. I personally love them. Now, this episode was a monthly giveaway, and one of our community members, Moocow, requested a video about my top 10 favorite point-and-click games. Now, I haven't played that many of them, right? So saying my favorites might be a little bit difficult, a little biased, but what I can do is talk about the 10 best point-and-click games I've played so far, so that's what we're going to do today. Let's begin. Sierra was notorious for their Quest line of games, and there were tons of them. Space Quest, King's Quest, Quest for Glory, and Police Quest. In fact, some of my favorite Sierra memories were all tied to point-and-clicks, with my repressed memories being tied to my mom buying me The Lost Mind of Dr. Brain, which fucking sucks! Some of you might remember Police Quest 1, and for those of you who don't, you might know this franchise as SWAT now, because around Police Quest 5, there was a transition in how the game was designed. The first 5 games in the series, they were all point-and-clicks, and once the series rebranded to SWAT, all of the rules went out. I guess chalk it up to Vivendi's publishing style. Returning to the original Police Quest, we play as Sonny Bonds, an officer in the Lighton Police Department who goes through the process of tracking down the Death Angel, a known drug dealer. We start off by pulling traffic duty and then eventually become a detective, and the rest you're just gonna have to figure it out on your own. Now, the version I played was the EGA version, meaning that there was a text parser. Basically, if I wanted to do something, I had to type it out. Look, desk, open, drawer, request handy from hooker, that kind of stuff. And text parsers can be incredibly daunting to contend with if you aren't used to that. So that being said, there is a VGA version that was released in 1992, and it is an amazing game, and I do suggest that you check it out. But before we move on, let's talk graphical standards real quick, because I'm going to sling a lot of acronyms around like the Alphabet Boys, and some of you might not have been alive during the era that we're talking about, so let's just play a little catch up, right? In 1981, there was the MDA, which was IBM's monochrome display adapter. Most of the games that utilized it were text adventures. But the same year, IBM released the CGA, or color graphics adapter. This was a big change for graphics, and depending on what kind of monitor you had, either RGB or composite, you would see a vast difference in the colors that were available. In many cases, it was just purple and blue. It wasn't pretty, but it got the job done. After a few years, we got the EGA, or Enhanced Graphics Adapter, which was pretty much par for the course for the mid-80s for point-and-clicks and adventure games, right? Finally, we have the VGA, or Video Graphics Adapter, 1987, and you'll see a vast majority of franchises that hopped from the 80s to 90s in terms of PC gaming utilizing this medium. It's also my favorite. With that in mind, I'll only be using acronyms from now on, but at least you'll know what I'm talking about. Continuing with the lineage of Police Quest, I was pleasantly surprised by the storytelling of Police Quest 2: The Vengeance. It immediately follows the events of Police Quest 1, where we're escorting Jesse Baines, the Death Angel from the first game, to a retrial when he suddenly whips out a shiv and escapes from custody. So, naturally, we need to track him down. Now, unlike the first game, this one is only in EGA. One thing I've noticed is that throughout time, when it came to these games, they only tended to provide the VGA upgrade package to the first game in the series, which kind of sucks because Police Quest 2 is even better than the first, and if you ask me, is the last game in the series before it started a very slow decline. Now, the most recent Police Quest game is SWAT Elite Troops, and it's a mobile game, so thank you, Vivendi, for killing a great franchise. King's Quest is an amazing series, and the majority of the franchise is absolutely solid. It went downhill around King's Quest 7 and died with King's Quest 8 Mask of Eternity, which was a fucking joke. That being said, King's Quest 6, Air Today, Gone Tomorrow, is a VGA masterpiece where we play as Prince Alexander, the son of King Graham, who travels to the land of the Green Isles after he has a bad dream about some lady that he wants to stick his weenie in, right? Princess Cosima. So he gets on a boat and he crashes said boat, and the rest is up to you to figure out. This game was designed by Jane Jensen and Roberta Williams, which if you don't know who they are, Jane Jensen would go on to make Gabriel Knight, right? The Gabriel Knight franchise, and Roberta Williams was one of the founders of Sierra, specifically the wife of the founder, Ken Williams. I've actually talked to Ken Williams. It's a really cool dude. Space Quest V is an interesting game. We play as Roger Wilco, who finally, after all of these years of accomplishing all these amazing things throughout the known universe, becomes a space captain of a gigantic space garbage ship. Even looks like a vacuum cleaner. While he's exploring, he uncovers the plot where toxic waste is being dumped that turns people into horrible creatures, hence the subtitle, The Next Mutation, an obvious play off The Next Generation. In fact, this game is chock full of Star Trek references, but I came from a Star Wars household, so I didn't understand any of them. True story. I did enjoy this game, but damn, did it have a lot of dialogue. It's also a rather short game. It only took me about an hour and a half to beat it. Well, looks like we're going backwards in time. King's Quest V, Absence Makes the Heart Grow Yonder, is my number 7 pick because it's fun. It's fun. Well, the PC version is. Don't play the NES version. The NES version is very much inferior. Just don't even look its way. We play as series staple King Graham trying to find his castle that was yeeted away by the brother of a wizard that we cucked over in King's Quest III. We turn him into a cat. And the one thing that I find interesting in this game is that it fundamentally feels like a standalone, but takes place in a location that was present in one of Sierra's first games, The Wizard and the Princess, The Kingdom of Serenia. If it were up to me, I'd tell you to only really check out the earlier King's Quest games if you really want to check out text parser games. King's Quest 5 and 6, absolutely solid. The most recent King's Quest game, for those who care, was a total reimagining of the original franchise, and it's awesome. While it's not a direct remake of the games, the 5 chapters do cover the entirety of the King's Quest universe by referencing or reimagining the previous titles, and it is worth a shake. This is a hot take, because if you liked Phantasmagoria 1, there's a little bit of a chance that you might not like Phantasmagoria 2, but I did enjoy it even though it can go off the rails sometimes. Honestly, this game feels like an interactive episode of The Twilight Zone. Phantasmagoria was the first game to ever make me shudder, cringe, in a good way. It's like a movie in how it was presented, and the budget was as much as a Hollywood film, $4.5 million. 600 different scenes were filmed, it was highly advanced for what it was, there were 25 live-action actors. This is a dope-ass game. In the game, we play as Adrienne Delaney, a novelist who lives with her husband, Don Gordon, who's a photographer. Apparently, on their episode of House Hunters, they didn't bother doing their research because this house was owned by a black magic practitioner who murdered all of his wives in extremely grotesque manners. This is another game where explaining the plot would spoil the game tremendously, so I'll let you check it out on your own. Where I loved Sierra point and clicks, the other side of the coin for me was LucasArts, who made tons of great point and clicks. I'm talking Full Throttle, The Dig, Sam & Max, Grim Fandango, Indiana Jones, lots of games. But one of my favorites is The Secret of Monkey Island. It's an absurd game themed around pirates, in fact all of them are. In this game, the first in the series, we play as Guybrush Threepwood, who goes to Melee Island in the hopes of becoming a pirate. He has to accomplish 3 trials, and once he does that, finds out about a legendary pirate ghost named LeChuck, who died trying to go to Monkey Island to bone the governor, Elaine Marley. We're essentially discovering the secret of Monkey Island, which isn't too much of a secret, but I'll let you figure it out. The game does look rather rudimentary for what it is, and I was okay with that, especially since I personally cut my teeth on EGA titles, so seeing dilapidated artwork and using the Scum Engine's action controls were a welcome upgrade to me. But if you want a modern version, they did remaster it, and it's awesome. It's really cool. I strongly encourage you to check out the remaster. Monkey Island 2: LeChuck's Revenge is the sequel to The Secret of Monkey Island. While the first game was released on anything that could run it, Amiga DOS, Atari ST, Mac, FM Towns, Sega CD, you name it, it was there, the sequel, Monkey Island 2, was only released on DOS, Amiga, Mac, and FM Towns initially. Generally, it's a major upgrade. It looks great. I was actually impressed. Monkey Island 2 continues the story of Guybrush Threepwood, who after destroying LeChuck heads to Scab Island to try to find the Big Whoop, a legendary treasure. When he arrives to Scab Island, he gets robbed by a little pirate dictator named Largo. The problem is Largo used to work for LeChuck, and we have the beard of LeChuck, right? So Largo steals back this beard and essentially reanimates the ghost pirate LeChuck, and that's what we have to contend with. There's tons of silly jokes, tons of little quests, but the overall game flow is pretty phenomenal for what it was. It was a faithful continuation of the story, and I hope that the third game follows suit. If you know Tex Murphy, you know that in some ways it was distinctively different from other games at the time. I don't know if this would technically be considered a point-and-click given that it uses the text parser, but I do lump in those games with traditional point-and-clicks because they are predecessors to those games, right? The ones that 100% fit the bill. In the game, we play as Tex Murphy. He's a detective, and what makes it stand out is that we need to interview people. We need to use keywords, which at the time, I can't recall any other game that did that. Also, we manually or automatically fly to our next objectives by using waypoint codes. While that introduces a sequence break, it still manages to be fun. The only chief complaint I had with it is that you have to be exceptionally close to the context items to interact with them with the parser. Other than that, it was perfect. Beneath the Steel Sky is a funny, tongue-in-cheek, but sort of serious game from Revolution Software. At first, I kind of hated them. Lure of the Temptress, their first game, was an obnoxious one that I really couldn't get into, and it had a groundbreaking bug that made it impossible to play, so I jumped to the second game that was made by Revolution, Beneath the Steel Sky, and with Beneath the Steel Sky, they established a precedent for themselves, and that is absolutely wonderful storytelling, amazing environments, a solid soundtrack, everything that I wanted from a point-and-click. Now, traditionally in many point-and-click games, we go to different areas, and those areas require a significant amount of backtracking, in some cases to a totally different city or a locale. Look at Sam & Max, we're having to drive across the entire country. But in Beneath the Steel Sky, we stay relatively confined and contained to the immediate area, which I found to be a nice touch. The adult humor is subtle, the overall tone of the game is focused around a dystopian future, and you can tell people are jaded by the times. It's really awesome. I enjoyed it. I haven't played the sequel Beyond a Steel Sky, but I hope to at some point, even if it isn't the greatest. I'd love to see how Robert Foster's adventure continues. When you check out as many games as I do on a fairly consistent basis, you don't tend to be surprised, right? Loom changed that for me. I've known about Loom for years because it's a blatant product placement in The Secret of Monkey Island. There's a guy in the bar named Cobb who wears a badge that says, "Ask me about Loom," and if you do, he'll tell you all about it. He'll say, "You mean the latest masterpiece of fantasy storytelling from Lucasfilm's Brian Moriarty? Why, it's an extraordinary adventure with interface of magic, stunning high-resolution 3D landscapes, sophisticated score, and musical effects." To me, that was bullshit, right? There's no way that you can place your product in a game and have it be accurate, right? I was wrong. I was very wrong. And what Cobb says in The Secret of Monkey Island is 100% reflective of the experience I had while playing it. Now, the one downfall is it's a very short game, so I don't want to tell you the plot or even how to play it, because this is an experience you should enjoy on your own. Trust me. Torin's Passage holds an incredibly important place in my gaming career and in my heart. It was my first ever point-and-click, and it was my first exposure to PC gaming on my grandmother's computer. To me, this game is the perfect Sierra point-and-click, but I can understand that it might not be impactful to others. Torin's Passage was created by one of my favorite Sierra developers, Al Lowe, who is known for his raunchy humor, especially in the Leisure Suit Larry franchise, which I've played most of. In fact, Leisure Suit Larry 3 almost made this list, but the gimmicks were a little bit too much. Torin's Passage itself, though, is about a child of royalty that was saved by a servant from assassination, but the maid was framed for it and Torin was placed in the protective care of the Farnhams. The maid is actually a sorceress named Licentia, and she kidnaps Torin's parents, and the rest I'll have to leave to you. This game is a mixture of both buddy comedy and coming of age. It's basically a young man who's going through a grand adventure through numerous realms to save his parents, and I play through it at least twice yearly just to remember a time where the glow of the computer monitor made me a little bit happier. And that's it for today. Were there any point and clicks you remember having a blast with? Feel free to tell us down below. If you watch this video to completion, then you'll likely enjoy my other content, and I feel you'll enjoy being part of a dedicated community that simply likes to remember when life was a little bit easier to live. You're home in this community, and I'd love to have you here. Also, feel free to hit that like button. It makes Cobb's job of sharing Loom that much easier. Also, it increases the visibility for everything I work on daily. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.